dear colleagues, it was the first time as I thought about Vasiliev logic at all, and my interest in Vasiliev's logical theory is related with the interest of my colleagues. It was important to answer to the question why Vasiliev is actual now. And I have no formulas and no schemes to show in the presentation, and my work will be devoted to interpretation of the main ideas of Vasiliev, ideas about the imaginary logic. According to two statements of Vasiliev, I show this statement. Thinking may change, but it's not everything there that is changeable. And also there are some absolute logical truths, but it's not all the truths of logic that are absolute. It is his main ideas. And from the article Logic and Metalogic, and I try to recreate the way of his argumentation. The first argument points out the existence of analytical and synthetical truths, whereof the first are necessary while the second are not. Do all the laws of logic have analytical character? This is the question which Vasiliev writes drawing on the similarity of the laws of logic and those of geometry. It's, it's very good. It's parallelism with imaginary geometry of Lobachevsky. The second argument of article is based on the similarity. Vasiliev argues that the fifth postulate of Euclid is independent from the others and so may be substituted by some other argument without any contradiction arising. Then the similar condition should lead to the similar consequences of the law of contradiction. The third argument is an ontological one. Vasiliev points at the word of fulfilled contradiction created in the systems of Nikolaus Cusanus and Hegel. And another phrase of Vasiliev is here: when they were thinking contradiction as existent and actual, were not they thinking logically? Being carried away, as it were, by this argument, he speaks further on about earthly logic of the law of contradiction, setting it against the logic of some remote corner of our universe where contradictory things may exist. In that remote place, he argues, reason would become accustomed to the triple division of proposition into the true, the false, and those having the third meaning, and would act accordingly. Hence, Vasiliev derives the dependence of some logical laws on the conditions of experience. He tries to provide a foundation for their empirical nature. Changing of empirical sphere leads them to changing of their laws. In this he follows Kant, who divided logic into the general, pure one, and the applied. Also, according to Kant, the later is the sphere where the laws of pure logic are applied to specific experience. Empirical nature of some logical rules is founded by two following lines of argumentation. Let's follow the first one. A criterion of any law's empirical character consists in its ability to be eliminated. We know it's very good, like after the ethical of Vasiliev. The empirical character of the law of contradiction is provided with grounds by the very fact that imaginary logic does exist. The logic where contradictory predicating is just one of the ways to predicate. Also, the logic of proposition is still the classical one, meta-relevant. The second proof of the empirical character of the law of contradiction is based on Kant's formula of this law. this comes formula. According to this formula, there is no object which predicate can be contradictory to the object itself. Vasiliev founds his law of contradiction on incompatibility of object qualities, on it being impossible to predicate more than one quality simultaneously, which, according to Vasiliev, creates a basis for negation. Incompatibility of qualities, argues Vasiliev, is an empirical condition. The fourth argument brought forward by Vasiliev actually is the developing of the third. Empirical logic is claimed to be something which is created in the process of life and struggle, and serves as a live organism, a means of struggle and a reflection of both environment and a man. If we forget for a while who Vasiliev is and make an attempt an objective investigation of his arguments, then we cannot but admit that they are hopeless. From this point, I start to criticize Vasiliev's conception and Vasiliev's argumentation. His referring to the imaginary logic of Lobachevsky is hardly suitable. As it is well known, Lobachevsky first tried to prove the fifth postulate of Euclid, expecting that the supposition of it being negated would lead to a contradiction. After he had found that had not been the case, and having discovered a new geometry, he tried to find a model for this new science. Later on, Beltrami managed to do this. As for the law of contradiction, as Vasiliev sees it, the case is completely different. When he speaks about predication, he postulates its triple character straight away, at the same time, strongly emphasizing the retaining of classical law of metallurgy. He does not examine whether this triple character is compatible with other principles of classical logic. Just as far from Vasiliev's theoretical efforts stay intuitionism, which, as we remember, rejects the law of the excluded third as a result of having adopted semantical attitudes different from those of classical logic. And on this differentiation, we need to have a strong attention, and we need to emphasize it, because we have two different approach of Vasiliev and approach of intuitionism. Is the first without semantical background, and the second with one. Vasiliev is pointing out the synthetic character of the statement. The sum of triangles equals to square angles, is a citation from Kant, corresponds with Kant's views, but it has nothing to do with the laws of logic. Moreover, if we add to this formula a concretization on the surface with a zero curve, then we will have a still synthetic proposition, but of an apodictic character, which would reflect, according to Kant, a result of pure contemplation. The ontological argument demonstrated by Vasiliev are the weakest and most unconvincing. The concept contradiction has many meanings, so that it is not advisable to mix up the meaning usually assigned to the term in logic with the meaning it requires in philosophical theory by Hegel. Where contradiction may be understood as the presence of opposing tendencies in an object or a phenomenon. He is explaining the origin of the law of contradiction through referring the life and struggle just adds some not very sophisticated psychologism to this technological confusion. And this conception is impossible to make clearer. Finally, the proofs of empirical nature of some logic laws fall apart. The first one makes a logical circle, as it explains the empirical character of the law of contradiction through postulating the possibility to build a logic without the law altogether. But the first step towards building of such a logic consists, in Vasiliev's article, in claiming the law of contradiction as not functioning in predicating. And there are no attempts made, as we have seen, to consider whether the law is compatible with others' principle or not. The second proof, Vasiliev's proof, is based on the actually wrong understanding by Vasiliev of Kant's formula and on his changing the thesis, as it were. Vasiliev takes no notice of Kant's example, no uneducated person is educated. It is citation from pure reason, where we actually deal with contradictory predicates, to be educated and to be non-educated. He keeps saying that white and black are incompatible instead of talking about black and non-black. Thus, instead of considering the impossibility to actually negate a predicate on object processes, Vasiliev is considering the predicates which are not logically related in this way. Also, it is hardly suitable to mention Leibniz in his context because the latter, when describing the law of contradiction, talks about the impossibility to simultaneously predicate something to an object and to negate this predication, and also he explains the impossibility for a statement to be true and to be negated at the same time. All in all, Vasiliev follows Mill's interpretation of the law of contradiction without escaping Mill's Leib's in argumentation, pointed out by Edmund Husserl in his logical investigation. And as we know, Mill claims the law to be empirical when there are no grounds for it to be so. In other words, instead of scientific empiricism, the results of which are not to be ignored, we are faced with simple arguments of common sense, which, in their turn, disguise the metaphysical premises that hold experience as the only source of cognitive forms. So, as it happens, the whole ethical logic and metalogic should be considered as a failure. The intuition underlying this word is of a more serious nature. So, it was often with a philosopher between 19th and 20th century. A lot of intuition was right, but the form of this intuition, which they get by writing the books or article, don't correspond with these ideas itself. We cannot consider as trivial the statement which claims that the laws of logic are the laws of reason as such. It's so not because today we have a number of various logics which someone may consider to be alternatives to each other, and also not because Vasiliev apparently was the first to open the door for these logics to emerge. Classical concept of laws of reason boils down to Aristotle and Leibniz. Hegel is undoubtedly among its supporters, and I will omit details about this classical conception. It's not important now, and go to my conclusions. We now I think, good the writings of Aristotle and Leibniz. To what extent may the alternatives to actually existent reason be represented by this reason itself? This is one of the questions raised by Vasiliev, and he gives the only possible answer. do not extend, and under no condition. But why is this so? Independently from its source and from its either empirical or historical state, reason always creates its laws. Reason does not have this possibility to pick up laws while considering different options, but it is always predetermined by its transcendental ground, not having a possibility to act differently than it does. Reason is deprived of any possibility to contemplate an alternative model for itself. If we want to present any way of reason's functioning as a way possible for it to realize, then actually existing reason just won't be able to assess this new way because it won't be able to see itself acting along the presented new scheme. It is the argumentation like Kant's. This means that there is only one actual logic, which expresses reason's laws, and everything deviating from it just cannot be logic because it doesn't come up to the requirements set up by its definition. This is the way it all looks as seen in the perspective of the classical doctrine. Yet Vasiliev, when talking about metalogic, has in mind exactly logic, because as he turns to empirical logics, by which he means some imaginary logic, he uncovers a sphere of formal description of arbitrary object, which just because being imaginary cannot be logical. Vasiliev's intuition is directed at a play with the axiomatics of an arbitrary theory, which, due to some misunderstanding, has happened to be applied to the sphere completely unsuitable for it, the sphere of logic. The value of Vasiliev's approach for modern logic is in the fact that it chooses the logical as an universal instrument for analyzing any system, arbitrary system of relation. Yet we should not forget that such an application of logic is tied up on not on its nature, but on the fact that the form of logic makes it easier to grasp and understand the very principle of systematic organization of arbitrary object relations. Logic as a canon, the Platon word canon, a rule, a lot of rules. Logic as a canon of reason appears to be very attractive for this role of an instrument of investigation of arbitrary relations. Thus, Vasiliev's approach fulfills those intentions of the 19th century's philosophical tradition, which considered logic as an organon, in opposite to canon, and tools of investigation, and was expecting quite a lot from logic's merge with empirical sciences. It's all